This conference will now be recorded.
We begin with the next topic in our syllabus, that is antiprotozoal agents and anthelmintics. Now, we will first see what are antiprotozoal agents. In antiprotozoal agents, we'll be seeing about protozoal infections. Protozoal infections or a protozoal disease is caused by a parasite, and this parasite is transmitted into our bodies through a vector. Like for example, in malaria, the mosquito is a vector which is transporting the microorganism or the parasite which is causing the infection. The parasite is such an organism which is surviving or thriving with the help of all the nutrients that are going from our body. So its DNA, its RNA, the protein formation, everything is dependent on the host body. So if you make arrangements so that the host body is not able to supply these substances that for the formation of the DNA and RNA, then you could kill the parasite which is causing the protozoal infection. Now, this parasite, like I told you, enters our body through a vehicle or a vector. That means it is a medium to enter the body. So this way there are different ways in which it can enter. Mostly these protozoal infections or these parasitic infections, they are more common in tropical countries where the climate is hot and very humid. At the same time, there is unhygiene environment, cleanliness is not there. There is like a climate very much like our country in India, where hygiene is not maintained. So there are different types of protozoal infections that we are aware of. Like for example, we are aware of malaria, amoebiasis. There are others like giardiasis, leishmaniasis, trypanomoniasis, trichomoniasis, pneumonocytosis, and toxoplasmosis. So what we are going to see mainly is about malaria and amoebiasis. Malaria we will be studying separately in the form of anti-malarial agents. This chapter or this topic, this class, we will be mainly concentrating on amoebiasis. Now, you all must have drawn that funny diagram in school of amoeba, which is an organism which does not have any particular shape or size. It is a unicellular organism. So this amoeba or this disease, amoebiasis, this amoeba is a parasitic protozoa. That means it is going to survive in the host depending on the host. Now this name, the name of this amoeba, this parasitic protozoan, the name of it is Entamoeba histolytica. So Entamoeba histolytica is the parasite which is responsible for causing amoebiasis. I told you that disease or these protozoal diseases, they are all coming to us through a vector. So in the case of amoebiasis, contaminated food and contaminated water is the vector. It is the vehicle through which this disease amoebiasis or the microorganism Entamoeba histolytica is going to enter our bodies. So you will very often see that once the rainy season starts, the cases of amoebiasis are at a rise, mainly because the sewage water and the drinking water pipelines in our country are running neck to neck next to each other. So often it is seen that this water could get mixed if the maintenance of these pipelines is not done. And if you do not filter the water, you do not boil the water, you do not take all the precautions that we usually should take in the rainy season while drinking water, then you are bound to suffer from amoebiasis. Many a times we see that now, of course, it is not possible, but initially, whenever we used to have street food, immediately we used to suffer from diarrhea, vomiting, dysentery, and all these things, fever. So all this is mainly because there is contamination of food and water of that street food that you have consumed, and because of this contaminated food and water that have been consumed, you have now contracted amoebiasis. The entamoeba histolytica is progressing, the organism is progressing in growth in our bodies. Now sometimes you are just a carrier, okay, which means the entamoeba histolytica does not show any symptoms in your body, your immune system is very good, you are just a carrier of the microorganisms. So every time you are passing stools, that time in the fecal matter, this entamoeba histolytica is getting excreted out. It is entering the sewage water, and then again it is infecting other people by coming in touch with by contaminating the food and water. So this amoebiasis, as it is called, it mainly affects the gut mucosa and it affects the liver, which leads to dysentery, colitis, and liver abscess. Whenever you will see symptoms in a person who is suffering from amoebiasis, it will be called as invasive amoebiasis. The other one, like I told you, is non-invasive amoebiasis or uh, asymptomatic amoebiasis, where there will be no symptoms. And all the subtropical countries where sanitation is poor, you will see this type of infection of amoebiasis flourishes in the rainy season. This is what is the life cycle of the Entamoeba histolytica. So this Entamoeba histolytica has a biphasic life cycle which exists in two forms. One form is the infectious cyst form and the other is the trophozoite form. So this is what is the cyst form, which is outside the intestine. And after it enters the intestine, it grows and it forms what are called as trophozoites. Now when I am saying that it is entering our body through food and water which is contaminated, this food and water which is contaminated is actually carrying these small cysts which are invisible to our eyes, we are not able to see them. So these cysts of Entamoeba histolytica, they have a very strong cell wall which is made up of chitin, and because of this presence of this strong cell wall containing chitin, the cyst is easily able to survive in the acidic environment of the stomach. Now after it enters into the body through the food and water, it will pass through the stomach and it will invade the small intestine as well as the liver. And once it enters the small intestine and liver, it is in the small intestine that it is going to start reproducing by simple division, and it is going to develop to form trophozoites, and then these trophozoites will enter the different blood vessels from the small and the large intestine, and they will be transported to the other organs in the body. So the closest organ that it will immediately attack will be liver, and it will flourish in the liver, it will grow in the hepatocytes, and after growing over there, it will cause liver abscess. There will be swelling in the liver, there will be pain and inflammation, and through a CT scan and stuff, you will be able to detect that there is liver abscess that has developed. Along with that, you will also need to run the liver function test, which will show that the ALT, AST levels have gone up because of liver inflammation or inflammation of the hepatocytes. Okay, so this is the life cycle of the Entamoeba histolytica, which is responsible for causing amoebiasis. It is present in the form of cyst from the contaminated food and water. It will enter into the human body. It will survive the acidic environment of the stomach because of the strong cell wall containing chitin, and once it passes through the acidic environment of the stomach, it will easily survive in the large and the small intestine. It will start multiplying there to form trophozoites, and trophozoites are the ones which are going to spread the infection through the different parts of the body. The clinical classification of amoebiasis can be done, as you can see, as intestinal amoebiasis and extraintestinal amoebiasis. When the infection or when the trophozoites are restricted still to the small and the large intestine, where you will see that the patient is suffering from dysentery, there is blood or pus in the fecal matter, he has excessive dehydration, there is colitis, there is pain in the stomach. All of these are indications that there is intestinal amoebiasis. Once the number of trophozoites in the intestine, both small and large, grow, these trophozoites will slowly start moving out, and they will start spreading to the nearby organs first. So they will first spread to liver to cause liver abscess. They will also spread to the anal region, and at the anal region also there will be infection which will develop in the person. So these are the two clinical classifications of amoebiasis: intestinal amoebiasis as well as extraintestinal amoebiasis. You could treat amoebiasis through these different anti-amoebic agents based on the type of infection, clinical infection that the patient is suffering from. For both intestinal and extra-intestinal amoebiasis, you can use ipecac alkaloids like imetin. You can use nitroimidazole. The most famous drug from this is metronidazole, or you can use 4-aminoquinolines. If the infection is restricted only to be intestinal amoebiasis, then you can use some antibiotics like parmomycin. You have 8-hydroquinolines, which has the example of iodoquinolone. Then you have arsenical compounds and some miscellaneous agents like diloxonide. So among the intestinal and extraintestinal antiamoebic agents, metronidazole is the most commonly used drug, whereas in the case of intestinal amoebiasis, iodoquinolone and diloxonide are one of the most commonly used anti-amoebic agents. So further, what we will be seeing is we will be seeing each drug and its structure after this classification is over. We come to the most famous drug from this class, and that is metronidazole. You can see the structure here on your screen, which is a prototype drug, and it has bactericidal activity. Now, how does this metronidazole work? This metronidazole will enter the microorganism through the process of diffusion. And if you see the structure of metronidazole, it is a 5-nitroimidazole derivative. Okay, this is the imidazole ring. Okay, this is the imidazole ring. 5-membered ring system with 2 nitrogen atoms at 1,3 position is a imidazole ring, and at the 5th position it has a nitro group. So it is called as the 5-nitroimidazole derivative. Now, once this this metronidazole enters into the into the microorganism, the nitrogen which is present in the structure, it is going to cause, or it is going to generate or form what are called as free radicals. It will form two different form of free radicals. The first form is the superoxide free radicals, and the other is the nitroaryl anions. Both these free radicals are going to damage the DNA of the microorganism, or of the entamoeba histolytica. And because the DNA gets damaged, there is DNA fragmentation happening. The DNA breaks down into pieces, and because DNA fragmentation has happened, the neither is the entamoeba histolytica able to multiply, nor is it able to grow, survive further. So there will be death of the microorganism which is causing amoebiasis. Okay, so this is the mechanism of action of metronidazole. I repeat, metronidazole is a 5-nitroimidazole derivative which has an imidazole ring as well as a nitro group at the 5th position. After it diffuses into the microorganism cell, the into the amoeba, it will generate free radicals. Who will generate free radicals? The nitrogen which is present at the 5th position. And what two free radicals are they going to generate? They are going to generate superoxide and nitroaryl anions. And it is known to you, whichever the cell is and whatever are the free radicals, even if it is a human cell, it gets damaged in the presence of excessive free radicals. So because these two free radicals have been generated, they will cause DNA fragmentation, and because DNA fragmentation has happened, there will be um, death of the entamoeba histolytica. So this is the mechanism of action of metronidazole, structure of metronidazole, and the some of the therapeutic uses of metronidazole are: it is used in uh, invasive amoebiasis, luminal amoebiasis, other different types of protozoal infections like giardiasis, then trichomoniasis, pseudomoniasis. It is also used in ulcerative gingivitis and to treat peptic ulcer diseases. So these are some of the therapeutic uses of metronidazole, its structure as well as the mechanism of action. Another drug which is very useful in treatment of amoebiasis is eflornithine. Okay, you can see the structure on your screen. Eflornithine. This eflornithine is having the mechanism of action where it inactivates ornithine decarboxylase. Okay, now what is this ornithine decarboxylase? This ornithine decarboxylase is responsible for formation of derivatives which are called as polyamine derivatives, and these polyamine derivatives are required for the growth of the protozoal cell. Okay, so the sequence or the reaction is as follows. There is an enzyme which is called as ornithine decarboxylase, and this ornithine decarboxylase enzyme converts ornithine to putrescine. Okay, putrescine. It converts ornithine to putrescine. And if you inhibit this activity of ornithine decarboxylase, it will stop the formation of many polyamines, and these polyamines are specifically required by the protozoal organism for the growth and proliferation of the cell and the bacteria. So this eflornithine is a medication which is not only used in the treatment of amoebiasis, it is also used in the treatment of African sleeping sickness. Now, this African sleeping sickness also is a parasitic infection which is caused by the Trypanosoma brucei, and the vector or the vehicle to carry this protozoa, that is Trypanosoma brucei, into the human is the tsetse fly, and it is very common especially in the African subcontinent. And this Trypanosoma brucei microorganism requires polyamines for its growth and proliferation. So this is a very targeted drug. It is having a very specific action of preventing the formation of polyamines which are required for its growth and proliferation. And how is it doing so? By attacking or inhibiting the action of ornithine decarboxylase enzyme, preventing ornithine to convert to putrescine, so that the growth and proliferation of the Trypanosoma brucei will not happen. Okay, so this is eflornithine, its structure, its mechanism of action, as well as its uses. It's more often used in the infection caused by the Trypanosoma brucei parasite than it is used for amoebiasis. Okay, the next slide shows us the mechanism of action, or the synthesis of metronidazole from glyoxal. Do make it a point to note down the synthesis procedure of metronidazole. Now, like there is metronidazole, which is a 5-nitroimidazole derivative. Similarly, you also have tinidazole, which is also having a anti-protozoal and antibacterial activity. You see in the structure of tinidazole also, there is a nitrogen ring, a nitrogen substitution on the imidazole ring. Okay, so this is also one of the examples which can be quoted under the class of antiparasitic agents which are used, which are having imidazole ring and are used for the treatment of amoebiasis. We also have another drug in the same class having a very similar structure, and that is ornidazole. Ornidazole also, you will see at the 5th position, has the nitro group. So if you decide to write the SAR for these nitroimidazoles or 5 nitroimidazoles, then the first point that is mandatory to have antiamoebic activity is presence of the nitro group, NO2 group, at the 5th position of the imidazole ring. Of course, the second point should be that the imidazole ring is very important for activity. However, you can replace the imidazole ring with a thiazole ring. Okay, that means one of the nitrogens can be replaced with sulfur. Thia means sulfur. Okay, so you can replace it with a thiazole ring system and you will get the same activity. So there are these 3 important points in the SAR of 5 nitroimidazole derivatives, whose examples are ornidazole, tinidazole, and metronidazole. The first point is presence of imidazoline ring system is important for activity. Then having a nitro group at the 5th position is mandatory to give anti-amoebic activity. Otherwise, how will the radicals get generated? And the third and the last point is you could replace this imidazole ring system with a thiazole ring system to get the same type of activity. So these are some of the 5 nitroimidazole derivatives which are used in the treatment of amoebiasis: the nitroimidazole, metronidazole, tinidazole, and ornidazole. We next move on to a drug probably which you must have seen in your pharmacognosy class, and it is an ipecac alkaloid, and the drug is imetine. So this imetine, which is an alkaloid in nature, and it is obtained from the ipecac plant or the ipecac tree, is also having good antiprotozoal activity. It is obtained from Syphilis ipecacuna, and it is having potent amoebicidal activity, especially on the trophozoites. If you recollect the life cycle of the amoeba, entamoeba histolytica, you will recollect that there are two forms, the cyst form as well as the trophozoidal form. So this drug imetine is specifically active on the trophozoites. It does not kill the cysts. And there is another derivative of this emetine which has been formed, and it is called as dihydroemetine. And this dihydroemetine is more effective, but it is having less toxicity. Emetine has found to be more toxic than as compared to dihydroemetine. Okay, so with emetine you can also have another drug you can quote, that is of dihydroemetine, which is more effective and having less toxicity. So this is another example of anti-amoebic drugs which is going to be used in the treatment of amoebiasis. The next drug we see on the screen is pentamidine isthionate. Okay, so this pentamidine isthionate this is a pentamidine carbon chain. Okay, and it is linking the amidine or the amides. You can see over here there are amide groups on both these benzene ring systems. So that is why the name pentamidine isthionate. This pentamidine isthionate is directly attacking the DNA of the microorganism Entamoeba histolytica. What it will do is it will replace the adenine and thymine in the DNA structure. If you remember, the DNA structure contains 4 different types of purines and pyrimidines, that is adenine, thymine, cytosine, and guanine, and there is a sequence or there is a pairing that is followed. So in this pairing or in this sequence in the double helical structure of the DNA, this pentamidine will remove adenine and thymine and it will go and place itself over there. Now once this replacement with the drug of adenine and thymine in the DNA structure will happen, the further synthesis of new DNA, the formation of mRNA, and of course the production of proteins of the parasite will stop completely because the DNA is faulty. So this way these will inhibit the microorganism to grow. This drug also inhibits the activity of the topoisomerase 2 enzyme. So topoisomerase 2 enzyme is also responsible for DNA synthesis when the replication or multiplication of any cell is happening. So by this dual attack, that is replacing adenine and thymine in the DNA structure and stopping the action of the topoisomerase 2 enzyme, thereby inhibiting DNA synthesis, we will have anti-protozoal activity. The next drug from your syllabus is that of diloxanide. I told you, if nitroimidazoles are very famous, this diloxanide furoate is also a very famous drug. It is a drug of choice, especially in the treatment of asymptomatic amoebiasis or asymptomatic luminal infections, which can destroy trophozoites and to some extent cyst of the Entamoeba histolytica also. So once this dioxanide goes inside, that is once it is in vivo, it undergoes hydrolysis and it kills or it has amoebicidal activity on the Entamoeba histolytica. So this is often a drug of choice for both mild intestinal form of the amoebiasis as well as asymptomatic amoebiasis as well. So this is the example of dioxanoid furoate. The next class, another famous class that we have for the treatment of protozoal infections, especially luminal amoebiasis and giardiasis, and sometimes some fungal and bacterial infections of the vagina, is the 8-hydroxyquinoline. And the example in this class is that of iodoquinol. It is a very economical drug. Okay, if mm, you are seeing that the disease is caused mainly in subcontinental countries, and these subcontinental countries have a population which is very poor. So in such countries it is preferred to have such a economical drug or a cheap drug which has good patient acceptability. So such a drug is iodoquinol, which has the base of a quinoline ring system, and on the quinoline ring system it has the hydroxyl group placed at the 8th position. It is, like I told you, it is effective on both the trophozoites as well as the cyst, and it has it will directly attack the trophozoites or the cyst and give its amoebicidal activity directly at the site of infection. Okay, we have another drug also, the last one you can say from this class, and that is atovaquone. You can see the structure of atovaquone on your screen. Now this is actually having anti-malarial activity. We will be seeing anti-malarial topic, and there you will see that a very similar drug where we will be studying. And this atovaquone drug is having the capacity to bind with the mitochondrial membrane of the microorganism. It will collapse the mitochondria of the microorganism, and you know mitochondria is a very important part of any cellular organism, and if it collapses there will be no production of etc. That means there will be no energy generated. It is the powerhouse of the cell. So if no mitochondria, there is going to be cell death. So atovaquone is going to complexly bind into the mm, microorganism. It is going to cause the destruction of the mitochondrial membrane, and because the mitochondrial membrane gets destroyed, we are going to have the death of the parasitic cell, because there is no etc, there is no energy production in the cell happening anymore. Okay, so this is what is about the protozoal infections. Mainly, we have seen amoebiasis, the causative organism of amoebiasis. We have seen the life cycle of the causative organism, that is Entamoeba histolytica. Then we have seen the different types of amoebiasis, why and what basis they are classified on. We have classified anti-amoebic drugs and seen the mechanism of action, structure of some of the examples, like we have seen emetine and emetine. We have seen metronidazole and its derivatives. We have also seen the SAR of the nitroimidazoles. We have seen iodoquinol. We have seen dioxanide, and other than these, we have seen drugs like eflornithine, which comes under the miscellaneous class. Similarly, we have seen pentamidine isthionate, and the last drug that we saw was that of atovaquone. Okay, so this is about anti-parasitic drugs or drugs used in the treatment of parasitic infections. Okay,